Hello chess friends and welcome to Mamedyarov chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Decline series. So in this series we're covering this very nice opening from White's and from Black's perspective, and today we're continuing with the Queen's Gambit Declined, again with the so-called Harrwitz Attack. The Harrwitz Attack is a very aggressive method which is playable for White and for Black. In my opinion, the Harrwitz Attack is one of the most popular ways to play the Queen's Gambit Declined, and it is playable for Black. As I said, it's nothing wrong if your opponent is playing the Harrwitz Attack against yourself, or if you're playing against the Harrwitz Attack yourself. It is playable for both sides. There are beautiful elements for Black and for White, and of course we want to study them. Now we're studying the game a little bit more from Black's perspective. In my first video we have talked about the Harrwitz Attack ideas a little bit more from White's perspective with a great gameplay by Sergei Karyakin against Viswanathan. Now we're talking about the Harrwitz Attack a little bit more from Black's perspective with a great game here played by Hikaru Nakamura with the Black pieces against Mamedyarov with the White pieces. So here I think you see really the most important elements of this game. It was a brilliancy here played by Hikaru Nakamura, because it shows also how you should struggle for a win. It's not so easy to win a game, win a chess game. You should really apply every single strategy in your own game. So that's why I think this is a very instructive game with also very nice pawn end game, which you should also be familiar with. So as I said, there are really beautiful strategical and tactical elements in the game. That's why I decided to show you this one, in order to show you how to play properly here the Harrwitz Attack from Black's perspective. So let's check out now the game. Here Mamedyarov played the move d4. Of course we have knight to f6 by Hikaru, c4, e6, after move knight to f3 and d5. The game basically transposed into the Queen's Gambit Decline. So we have now knight to c3, the three knights variation. We have bishop to e7, which is really the best way here to proceed, although bishop to b4 seems a little bit tempting too. It's the so-called Ragozin variation. We're analyzing, of course, the Ragozin variation also in the continuation of the series, but so far we're playing this normal line with the move bishop to e7. So here we have bishop to f4. This is actually the Harrwitz Attack move. We have talked about this move in my previous video too. So in order, as I said, to get a better understanding of this particular video, please also check out my game that we have analyzed between Sergei Karyakin and Viswanathan. So after move bishop to f4, it's a very aggressive move by the bishop. You see there are many targets. The c7 is an obvious target. Maybe as a long term something like knight to b5 could actually work, but that's actually not the point of this opening. Actually the main point is to get a very nice piece activity here from White's perspective. We want to play e3, bishop to e2, bishop to d3, queen to c2, maybe rook to d1. So these are natural moves. Then of course secure the king by castling, and then of course have a very nice setup in the continuation of the game. So after move bishop to f4, the most popular way is simply to proceed with castling. We have e3 and now c5. c5 is, I think, the best way here from Black's perspective to proceed. I think you have to break White's central control, because if you don't do that, of course, if you play something like c6, we have talked about also these ideas in my previous video, I think you could face maybe here a very annoying move c5. Not that you lose the game because your opponent played the move c5, but in my opinion it's a different line, it's a different story, and from this point on you should apply different strategical ideas. So that's why, in my honest opinion, one of the best ways really is to break the center immediately. But it actually meets also the basic principles in chess, which says that if your opponent is stuck a little bit with the king in the center, that we should open simply the center. We want, of course, to have a clear center now, because when we watch now here the position, the main advantage that maybe Black has here in the continuation of the game is, of course, that Black has already secured the king by castling, and now you should actually break in the center. So here in the continuation you see now many times this move d takes c5. If White doesn't react correctly, if White maybe plays something like, I don't know, here bishop to e2, I think here d takes c4 is a natural idea, because after bishop to c4 I think we can even take here c takes d4, and after maybe something like e takes d4, White is is left with an isolated pawn. And maybe we can try here something like knight to d4, but then again I think knight to c6 is of course perfectly fine. Knight takes c6, b takes c6, maybe then queen to b6, attacking here also the weak b2 pawn. This could be playable, or as we said, if white here maybe try something like bishop to d3 or bishop to e2, you could try some different ideas. You could maybe try even here this one, d takes c4. After bishop to c4, you could maybe try here the move a6, pardon me. Here after move a6, we're announcing of course the move b5. So that's why what white is always trying to do in the Harrwitz attack is to delay the bishop's move, because if you play once with the bishop, we have talked about this ideas also in my previous video, if you play once with the bishop, then after the d takes c4, you lose another tempo by playing bishop takes c4. So here after a6 and maybe after castling, you could face the move b5, and it's now very annoying to play the game here from white perspective. I think black can have a great expansion on the queen side, so that's why you are pretty much forced maybe even to play, instead of castling here, the move a4. But after move a4, I think we can play here simply again c takes d4, and after something like e takes d4, we can notice that white is left with an isolated pawn, although again white could maybe recapture with the knight. But now our natural idea would be knight to c6, and if you I don't know, maybe even get challenged somehow, the main strategical goal I think here would be to play knight to b4 and then to play knight to d5, simply fixing the position around the square d5. This would be the strategy against an isolated pawn, and when you face an isolated pawn, you should always try to do a blockade, never allow your opponent to simply advance further here with the potential move d5. So that's why with knight to b4 and then knight to d5, we could have a compact position. So that would be the actual continuation after the early bishop to e2 or bishop to d3. We could simply, as I said, proceed here with d takes c4, then a6 and b5 stuff. So that's why after move e3 and c5, you face now many times this move, and we have talked about this move also in my previous video. It's here the move d takes c5. After bishop to c5, we have now queen to c2. So white is delaying the bishop move. As we said, if white plays now bishop to e2, we'll play again simply d takes c4 and then bishop to c4. Again, white lost another tempo. So the game is pretty much equal, and this should be playable for both sides. But that's actually something that white is trying to avoid. That's why white is playing simply around the move bishop to d2 or bishop to e2 or bishop to d3. Play simply a delaying move with the bishop plays now queen to c2. So now we're developing of course with the move knight to c6. We have now a3 here by Mamedyarov, and now comes the move queen to a5. Of course b4 is not working, that's obvious, because knight takes b4, bishop to b4 will happen because you have faced this tactical problems on the a file, so you couldn't recapture the minor piece, you lose the rook on the a file. So that's why here after move a3 and queen to a5, you see now many times rook to d1. It's a good move, it's one of the best moves here that white can play. Of course now b4 is an immediate threat. So here comes the move rook to e8. In my opinion, there are basically two choices here for black, or maybe even three. You could maybe try the move bishop to e7, rook to e1, and rook to e8 or rook to d8. In my opinion, rook to e8 is really one of the best ways, because we can notice now by delaying the bishop move, as we said, white is delaying the move bishop to e2 or bishop to d3. We are placing the rook on the same file where already the king is. So that's why if something gets cleared, if the center gets cleared, then of course the rook would come very actively into the game. So that's why many times you see now this idea from black's perspective, rook to e8, and now you see there are dynamics in the center. If something gets cleared, as we said, that could give white's king could be really in danger. So after move rook to e8, in my opinion, knight to d2 is a more pragmatic way for white to play the game, because knight to d2 is also threatening the move knight to b3. So here in the game, bishop to g3 was played by Mamedyarov. The move knight to d2 actually prevents here a very important idea of blacks. It's the move knight to e4. You see knight to e4 is not working anymore. So that's why after move bishop to g3, here in the continuation of the game, Hikaru Nakamura uses the moment opponent immediately and plays now the move knight to e4. If you play, of course, b4, it's not working again. White will never play the move, because even if you play this move in any time, you face really many tactical problems. So you should always calculate this tactics if your opponent is preparing the move b4, because b4 is actually not working here for white. It works in particular positions, but not in such an early stage of the game, where of course also the king is here stuck on e1, because again you could try here something like queen to a3. You see, even if you take, then we can take knight takes b4. You have to trade off the queen takes. We can also take out first the knight, and after something like knight takes queen takes queen on a3, you can play now this one, knight to c2 and the fork, and then you can recapture the queen. And here black is much better. The engine gives here already a +4 evaluation for black. Really wild stuff. So as I said, this is something that white should try to avoid. b4 is never an option. It is sort of a preparation maybe to play the move b4. It's a tricky tactical possibility that white can play in a couple more moves, but not immediately, as I said, when the king is simply stuck in the center. So here, after move bishop to g3, as we said, maybe knight to d2, or more pragmatic way to play the game. So that's why here Hikaru plays knight to e4 immediately. We have c takes d5. Here Hikaru undermines, Mamedyarov undermines the pressure a little bit in the center. We have e takes d5, and now rook to d5. And okay, it seems so that maybe something went wrong because Hikaru Nakamura lost the pawn, but actually it's not so, because here Hikaru Nakamura can play, of course, this move, knight to c3. We have b takes c3. If you play queen to c3, then the game becomes really wild. If you think that maybe black could be challenged, and maybe after trades of queens, maybe white is continuing the game with an extra pawn, that's actually not a huge problem, because you have to memorize, I think, this particular line. You can play simply the move bishop to e3, and then the game becomes really wild, because after something like rook takes a5, then you get simply bishop to d4, this discovered attack. You can maybe cover, then again bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and now we can take knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and after f6, bishop to c4, bishop to e6. Here black is obviously much better, because of course in the next move white would lose one of its minor pieces, and then black is continuing the game, of course, with up the exchange. So that's why you see it's not so easy now to play the game after move knight takes c3 and b takes c3. Okay, white is up a pawn, but that's actually temporarily, because first of all, what we should know is the a3 is weak, the c3 is weak, the rook is a little bit misplaced, so we can get another tempo against the rook with bishop to e6. So again, I think black has some counter plays here, although down a pawn, as we said, but this is not such a huge problem, I think, in the position, because still white needs to make at least 2 more moves in order to castle by playing bishop to e2 or then castling. So as I said, white needs to lose extra tempi. The rook is a little bit misplaced, and also there are now 2 weaknesses here, the weak a3 and the c3 pawn. So I think it's a great compensation for the pawn that we have lost. Now it's a perfect playable position here for black. So after move, as we said, b takes c3. Here in the continuation, we have now this idea, bishop to e6, attacking the rook, rook to d2, and now bishop to e7. Here Hikaru Nakamura plays now a calm game, because he notices that, of course, he has to regroup. Bishop to f6 now could be a great possibility to simply remaneuver the bishop to get the bishop on a better square, and then attack further this weaknesses. Although the engine doesn't like this move, I kind of like it, because still we can, of course, play normal attacking opportunities. So here bishop to d3, we have g6 castling. Now queen takes a3. So see, Hikaru Nakamura gained his pawn back, nothing wrong with this position, and still this is an isolated pawn, so that's why it's, I think, even slightly better here for black. Although the engine likes here more white's position, but I would like to play more this position from black perspective, in my honest opinion, because I find at least some kind of an idea how to attack this position. I know that at least in this position that this is a weakness, and I would probably play something like rook to c8, and then continue our pressure around against this isolated pawn. So that's why I think black's ideas in these positions are much clearer than white. White needs to regroup still somehow, so that's why here in the continuation of the game Mamedyarov chose to play this move, knight to d4, in order to improve a little bit his pawn structure. What he was hoping for is this move knight takes d4, which actually Hikaru Nakamura played, because after knight takes d4, okay, after c takes d4, I think here Shakman Mamedyarov got tricked a little bit. After c takes d4, okay, white is here improve the pawn structure, but actually now we have a huge strategical endgame problem here for white. The main endgame problem here is that black has now two connected pass pawns, and that's something that's basically unstoppable. So of course white has also two connected pawns in the center, but when we think about it harder, if you could just imagine this pawn structure without maybe the bishops, queens, rooks on the board, I hope you realize, although there are here two connected pawns, still this pawn on the e file has to run against this f pawn. So white will have problems to connect two pawns as really isolated two connected pawns. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So there's no way that maybe white will gain somehow two connected pawns here on the 6th rank, because if white's pawn gets here on e6, then it of course will be taken. So it's really hard for white to connect two extra pawns. White has to maybe play first f4, then e4, and then maybe make some kind of progress here, but it takes simply too much time. Meanwhile, with these two connected pawns on the queen side, black is already doing something. So here the engine already loves now also more black's position. So that's why, in my opinion, black is much better because of this strategical element, because of this two connected pass pawns on the queen side. So here rook from a to c8, we have queen to b2, queen takes b2. Here Hikaru Nakamura is accepting the challenge. He says, I know that I have a good game here on the queen side with these two pawns, so undermining the pressure, get a clarification is a perfect idea here. Simply trading off the queens, perfectly fine. So rook to b2, we have a counter idea here, rook to c3, because you cannot take the pawn, you lose the bishop of course. Here in the continuation we have bishop to e2, b6, e4, and as we said, although these are two connected pawns, but still this pawn has to run against this f7 pawn. No way that white will connect them in a good way here. So in the continuation we have bishop to c4. So again, normal ideas here. Here Hikaru Nakamura's main strategical goal is to go into an endgame. Whatever happens, it is perfectly fine for black. After move bishop to c4, rook to c4, rook to d1, rook to d8. Here Hikaru simply push the pawn. We have bishop to b4 attacking the rook, rook to d3, and now simply a5. You can be the judge of this position. You see this pawn is marching, there's nothing that can stop them. In the continuation we have now d5, we have a4, d6, okay, bishop to c3, we have now d7. It's obviously also very dangerous. Bishop to c7 is now also an idea, but here Hikaru shows his great tactical skills. He plays simply here the move b4, we have rook to d5, a3, rook to b5, and after a2, here comes the tricky part. After move rook to b8, here in the continuation we have rook to b8, bishop to b8, and now of course the serious threat is the promotion here. But maybe you can pause the video and find now the best continuation here for black. Find the winning move. I hope you can find it. It's a great move here by Hikaru Nakamura. Okay, here the correct move is the move rook to d4. Really great endgame skills by Hikaru, because after rook to d4 we have here the promotion. Even if you of course promote, then we can simply take rook takes, we are simply escaping, and then there's no way to catch anymore with the pawns. We can even play, I think here, simply b3, then play b2, and then simply get the promotion, because these two connected pawns on the 6th rank or on the 3rd rank, when we watch the game from black's perspective, are simply unstoppable for a rook. So really brilliant move here, rook to d4. Here the promotion was played, queen to a1, we have king to e2, and after queen to a6 in this position Shakri Mamedyarov resigned. So great game. I think many great strategical and tactical elements were applied here by the top grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura. I really enjoyed the game. That's why I think the most critical and one of the moments that you have to recognize in this Harrwitz attack is this move bishop to g3, that you have to play simply this move knight to e4, pinning the knight. Although it loses you probably pawn, but you have at least a great counter play here from Black's perspective. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this study. I really enjoyed this opening from White's and from Black's perspective. I think that it's something that we should study hard in the continuation of the series. We're covering, of course, also more ideas in the Harrwitz attack and also in some other ideas of the Queen's Gambit decline. If you want to see also my previous analysis, as I said, please watch the series from the first video, second video, third video, and so on, in order to get a better understanding what's going on the board. And if you want to study our previous video, here's the link of our analyzed gameplay by Sergei Karyakin against Viswanathan Anand. And if you have trouble maybe to play as Black, check out my hyper accelerated Dragon Sicilian defense series and my Nimzo Indian defense series as good responses to d4 and e4. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.